Brought to you direct from Studio 3B at Baird Brothers Fine Hardwoods, the American Hardwood Advisor is your source for trends, tips, and insights into how the building industry has evolved. Join me, Steve Stack, along with guest builders and industry leaders as we talk shop and go in depth on what it takes to be the best of the best. Dive into topics like architecture, industry trends, project plans, historical tools, tricks of the trade, and life's lessons from more than 6 decades of experience in the hardwood lumber business. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Stack here at Studio 3B, Baird Brothers Fine Hardwoods. We are joined again with our friend, Mr. Mike Jenkins, our resident antique woodworking tool expert historian. You want to know something about an antique tool? Mike has been there, done that. Mike, thanks for stopping by again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
You know, we met a while back, and it worked out that we have some common interest, and you are schooled in this, self-learned, got information from a lot of people along the road, I'm sure, and we enjoy having you down and talking about some of this stuff. One of the things that we've spoke of on your first visit down here, I remember, we have a couple joining planes up there, a couple big joining planes, and I set 2 of them down, and you said, yeah, that's European, that's American.
Yes.
And so it makes sense that a lot of the woodworking tools started in Europe.
Yes.
And then came across. And then the Americans got their hands on them and said, why don't we move this or that to try and improve them, possibly. Speaking to the joining planes.
Yes.
What is the major difference between a European design and an American design?
I guess the easiest to recognize is the location of the handle. The handle on the European joining or trying planes will be nearer the end, and apparently when the Americans started to design them, they thought it behaved a little bit better if the handle was a little bit closer to the throat. So a little bit more centered than the European tool.
And what I found interesting on both, the handle is shaped very similar to what a lot of us are familiar with, a handsaw handle.
Yes.
And it's mounted to the joiner plane, the body of the joiner plane.
Yes.
And I guess there's pros and cons, and it might just be which one you're more comfortable with if you're using it.
And the evolution of the handle location also changed. The early American planes, the handle is not centered in from the left to right, it's a little bit more to the right. And then if you look at the later joiner trying planes, it's more centered between the right and the left.
So that, and going back to another conversation we've shared, that holds true in some of the ads, for forming beams and so forth. Mm-hmm. You pointed out to me one time, it has intentionally a bowed or offset handle.
Not on the ads, on the what they would call the broad axe.
The broad axe, excuse me, yes.
The broad axe, and that was to give some relief for your knuckles so your knuckles didn't hit the beam. If you had the blade here and the handle here, your knuckles are likely going to be hitting that, but if the handle is offset, then you've got a little bit of relief. And
I'm thinking of the one that you and I shared, the broad axe that we have, that's probably a 2.5-inch swing.
Yes.
Curvature on that handle. And it makes perfect sense. You bust your knuckles enough times on the side of that beam, you're gonna go home at night and work on a new handle.
Right.
But I'm sure we see a lot of that through all of the different tools that...
Trial and error, and you work with you keep improving, keep modifying until it gets to the perfect point.
You know, and this working with the antique woodworking tools, it's not something you pick up and you catch on to it right away. It's an acquired, developed skill set.
Definitely. The first time you use a wooden plane, it's very, very awkward. But you use it for a while and you get some muscle memory and you realize how to hold the plane so it cuts the molding correctly and so forth.
Pressure sensitive, some things you got a horse, other
Right.
things you got a baby.
Yeah.
But that's the learning curve. And it's true with today's modern equipment. Not everyone can pick up an electric circular saw and be comfortable with it right off the bat.
It's loud to start with.
Yes. So there's one of the advantages of
Right.
the old tools, right? You mentioned in conversation the old tools versus some of the new tools, and in different applications, one will hold superiority over the other.
Yes.
The newer tools, in a production mentality, they're much more efficient.
No question.
But there are some old tools that even new technology can't duplicate.
I'm not sure I'm going to agree with that. I think technology can pretty much duplicate everything I can think of.
To an extent, and you've done enough woodworking. I'm thinking of a drawer box. And what's the joinery called at the corner of the boxes?
A dovetail?
Dovetails. You know, yeah, you can buy a dovetail fixture now for your router,
Yes.
but it's not that same old keyhole look.
No, it's not the same effect, but it's much more rapid to do it with the jig.
And then we'll go from rapid back to the authentic hand-cut dovetail. And there's the look.
Oh, the look is amazing. I mean, I love to look at a piece of furniture that's got the old hand-cut dovetails, and they're so tight, and it's just amazing that someone had the ability and the skill to make those dovetails so tight.
For the saw that they were using, for the layout equipment that they had, they were very precise.
Yes.
And they've held up the test of time.
And you'll see a 200-year-old blanket chest that's still nice and firm.
Yeah, nice, snug, tight, unless it was introduced to some very adverse conditions. Everything's nice and flush and just it goes together like a glove.
Yeah.
You know, it says a lot about the handwork.
Yes.
It says a lot about the handwork. So, can you think of any old tools that have an application that might be better than a tool today?
I think every tool that I can think of off the top of my head can be duplicated using modern technology and modern machines more quickly. Planes, chisels. We now have power sanders instead of having to scrape a surface smooth. And you start off with a coarse sandpaper, you end up with a fine sandpaper, and you get a nice smooth surface.
And as you're speaking and I'm listening, one scenario came to mind.
Okay.
In reproduction work, you may have to go old school on reproduction work with some of the cutters and so forth. If it came out of a beading cutter knife from a Stanley 45, say, you know, yeah, we have routers and beading bits for the routers, but they might be a skosh different.
It's possible. The quality of the old workmanship is superior to the quality of a new reproduction.
Oh,
it
yes.
looks the same, but if you look at the details, there are some shortcuts that the modern technology took advantage of that perhaps reduced the quality.
And a lot of it has to do, I think, with the joinery.
Yes.
That joinery back in the day was multifunctional. Yeah, it was very intriguing to look at, but it was the strength of the cabinetry.
If you tear apart an old Empire chest of drawers, frequently there will be a double tenon going into a double mortise.
Yeah.
Today, why do two when one will do?
Yeah.
Well, one will do, but it's not as strong.
You know, and I see it here at Baird's, and we'll talk further into it down the road. But I've admired a tool that you had on display at friends of ours with Wayne up at I-76 Antique Mall, and it was a crown plane.
A crown molder.
Crown molder, okay. And so it intrigued me the first time I saw it, because I looked at it and I thought, son of a gun, that is very similar to our profile B3070. And you brought her along today.
This is a crown molding plane that's got about a 4.5-inch wide blade, and it's rather heavy. It probably weighs 4 pounds or so. But if you were pushing this against a piece of wood and trying to form this shape in the wood, it takes a lot of horsepower. So these handles in front were actually, they're called apprentice handles, and the apprentice would be pulling on these two handles, and then the craftsman would be pushing with this handle, and between the two of you, you got through that piece of wood a little quicker.
You know what I did? I picked up a piece of our B3070 crown molding this morning. Let me step offset just a second, and it might be a little more understandable if we show the folks.
Okay.
Excuse me for 1 second, Mike. And what type of wood are those normally made out of?
Beech. Most of them are, most commonly you'll see beech. Sometimes you'll see apple or birch, and occasionally some other tropical woods. So
this was eerie when I saw this this crown cutter up at I-76 Antique Mall. This is the profile that we manufacture today, and we refer to that as a cove.
Yes.
And if we can maybe lay that over, how close that is, what, 100+ years later?
This is probably an 1820 crown molder, so 200 years old.
Unbelievable. So this is a piece of equipment.
Yes.
Today, with advancement in woodwork manufacturing, we have a set of cutters that matches that profile.
Yes.
Now those will be inserted into a shaper head or a molder head, spinning at a very high RPM, and we'll do this in one pass at somewhere between 40-50 lineal feet per minute. I wouldn't even want to guess how long it would take me to work on a 10-foot piece because of the stock you're removing.
Yes.
From that piece.
This is not a one-pass plane.
Right.
You'd have to do this multiple passes to get all of that wood removed.
That's why when you look at old photographs and you see those guys in the shop, they all had biceps about that big around. Because I don't care whether you were pushing or pulling that thing.
Right.
Oh my, I can't even. And in understanding the method behind that, you go into some of these older homes and you see the woodwork and the intricacy of it. And it gives you a completely different appreciation of what was tried and done.
And you see it also on furniture. a piece of furniture is a piece of furniture, but once you add some molding to it, either a waist molding or a crown molding at the top, it adds to the proportionality, and it just makes the piece of furniture look so much more attractive.
And the name escapes me now, but it has to do with design and architecture, whether you're talking about the elevation of a home, a piece of furniture. A great example here in our workshop, our studio corner, is the proportion of the panel configuration for the columns.
Definitely.
And it may come to me in our conversation, but that is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old when it was figured out. There's an actual scale that you can use, like similar to a slide scale, where as you expand it, the different areas graduate.
Yes.
And it's used in furniture, it's used in window sizes on elevations of buildings.
You see it in architecture?
Yep. And that hasn't changed. So some of the tooling has changed, but the design architecture of it hasn't.
Yes. Right.
It hasn't. There's a lot of reference guides available for the antique tools, for design work, for some of the, I think it's fun to visit some of the auction house sites and see what's available out there. And whether you're buying a piece similar to our interview desk, our woodworking bench here, and repurposing it, or whether you're looking to be part of that user group and you want a tool for its functionality and you're going to use it day in and day out. You've mentioned in the past with your personal choice of kind of towards the bottom of the funnel of your collections over the years, you were drawn to Stanley.
Yes.
And you have, I think you brought it along today, you brought your Stanley, I referenced it, your Stanley Bible.
Oh. This book is, I don't know, maybe 1996. So this is now 25 plus years old, but it is the Stanley Bible. Any tool that most of the tools that Stanley made are featured in here, described. There's a price guide that's now out of date, but it's a wonderful reference if anyone is ever interested in collecting Stanley. After you own your third Stanley tool, you need to have this to make sure you didn't make a mistake.
So I know you're affiliated with a couple different clubs, organizations, groups.
Yes.
Some on the auction side.
Yes.
Talk to the folks about that, because I know you're just starting into this. You've got a little interest in tool collecting, antique woodworking tool collecting. Yes, we have the internet, but if I don't know where to start, what to Google, it's pretty simple. But can you save folks some time and direct them to a couple of the key players?
There are several tool collecting clubs. There are 3 that I am actively involved with. One here in Ohio is called the Ohio Tool Collectors Association. We have 4 meetings a year. We just had one on a couple of days ago, and sometimes 40 people will show up with tools for sale and exhibits, displays to show off aspects of their collection. There's a larger group called the Midwest Tool Collectors Association, and they probably have, I'd guess, 3,500 members, and we have 2 meetings a year, one in June and one in October, and different parts of the Midwest area. The next meeting will be in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in June, and there you'll have maybe 300 or 400 people show up with tools for sale and displaying aspects of their collections.
You're gonna have to leave me know on that, because that's a nice weekend trip. to go down and see the exhibits?
Now you have to be a member.
Oh, you do have to be a member of the club?
Yeah, to come, but you can join.
We might have to look into that.
Right.
So I go to an auction, I go to an antique store or to a tool dealer, and I buy an antique tool.
Yes.
And depending on its condition and depending on whether I want to use it or whether I want to make it look pretty and put it on a mantel shelf or whatever the case may be, how do we start? When we jump into restoration?
Before we get to restoration, let's talk about buying it.
Okay.
The adage that a friend of mine once told me was, know what you buy and buy what you know. So you need a little bit of information before you go in and make a purchase. And something like this Stanley book would be a helpful guide to let you know relative rarity. Is this a $1,000 plane or is this a $10 plane?
And there's that kind of length to the field when you start talking about antique woodworking tools. You can have a $10 plane or you can have a $1,000 plane.
I was at an auction this past weekend and a little Stanley #1 brought $1,800. I can sell you a plane about the same size, which is not a Stanley #1, for $5. There's a big difference depending on what you're looking at, and you need a little bit of information before you make that first purchase. And you can get the information by talking to other collectors. Most tool collectors are willing to share some of their expertise and help beginning collectors. You can go to these tool clubs and you can see a wider variety of tools there than you will if you went to the local flea market. If you go to the local flea market, you're going to see some wrenches, you're going to see some screwdrivers, you're going to see some beat up planes, but that's not what you want to start buying. Buy the best quality you can afford at the time, and it'll hold its value better than a rusty wrench.
So, and I'm going back to a conversation we've had previously. Part of your Stanley collection was not only the tool, but also the box, the original box that the tool came in. So I'm thinking if you find that and it's in mint condition, it's just hands off, we don't touch it, maybe...
Don't even think about touching it.
Exactly. Now the $5 or $10 one, I'm thinking those were possibly of a different era, later production date or something, and they were more mass produced?
And a couple of things can contribute to the value of a tool. One of them is rarity.
Right.
When Stanley made, let's say they made tool number 5,000, they didn't. And it wasn't a very popular tool, and they only sold a few. Well, today that's a rare tool, so the rarity adds to its value.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
If they made 1,000 examples of that, then it's not nearly as rare, and so you're going to see more of those on the tables.
Yeah, and that probably holds true across the antique woodworking tool.
Every category.
Yeah, all the categories. All right, so getting back to restoration.
Yes.
We've touched on your crown plane. Very nice shape. Everything's nice and tight and secure. What would you do to maintain that appearance?
Leave it alone.
Okay.
And keep it dry.
So if I find a tool similar to that, where there are both wood and metal components, and there's 70, 80 years of dirt and dust and grime because it was sitting out in the barn,
yes.
How do I address that?
The least amount of effort is the best. So I would cautiously take off the old dirt. I wouldn't use any kind of an abrasive, no sandpaper, no scraping or anything like that. I use a variety of products for cleaning, We've got a couple of examples here. This is called Cotton Cleanser. It's a nice way to take off dirt, grime, oil, and grease. And that's about all you want to do. You don't want to sand the wood down. You don't want to make it look like a new plane.
And that, I think that crosses over or similar to if you find a nice old piece of furniture, depending on the condition, if you can get it to where visually it's still attractive to you and it still has that original finish on it.
Oh, don't touch it.
Right? So same thing with the
Yes.
the woodworking tools. Well, I've had the experience of working with the Cotton Cleanser product. Very user friendly. You're going to get dirty.
Yes.
But both the metal and the wood. And then when we were together months ago, you caught me putting the cotton cleanser beeswax on it, and you said, you know, a lot of the users don't like that because sometimes it'll get tacky.
The collectors, not the users.
The collectors. What's the product that you introduced me to that?
Just what you have here is Johnson's paste wax. Just wax the clean wood, and that'll keep other dirt from accumulating on it.
Yeah. And something as easy as that the handles on those little hatchets. I mean that there's nothing to it.
You don't need anything. This hatchet handle has an awful lot of oil from hand use over the last 100 years, and that protects the wood just fine. This has got a little bit of it's evidence of its age, some dings and a little bit of dirt. I wouldn't do anything to a handle like this.
Yeah, it's like you said, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right. And you know, and the adage is when you're doing any kind of restoration, you don't want to do anything that's permanent. Everything that you do should be able to be reversed. So if the technology in the next 100 years changes, then you haven't done something that's not reversible.
Similar to restoring a piece of artwork.
Yes.
And more or less that you just had in your hand, that in my eyes, that's a piece of artwork.
Mm-hmm.
While you had that,
yes,
and very true across the categories of woodworking, antique woodworking tools, people were pretty proud of their work in the day.
Yes.
And whether it be Stanley or the manufacturer of that, they'll a lot of times put their trademark on them.
Mm-hmm.
You find that true, and is that helpful to research that particular tool?
There are reference books around that can give you an idea of when this was made. This was probably made in the 1920s. I can't make out all of the detail on it. It was made in Philadelphia. Possibly it was made by Hammond, which made a lot of hatchets and axes in the Philadelphia area. But
now, what era would that be out of?
1920.
1920? Okay.
Within 10 years.
So, and I know from past experience with you, before you pick a metal block plane up, mm-hmm. You're starting to talk about it and identify it as a Stanley number 5 or this or that or whatever, but you know where to look to find that information on that tool.
A fair amount of information came from this book, and I've studied it for 25 years, so I know a little bit about what's in that book.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anyone knows everything that's in that book.
Stanley, when it comes to antique woodworking tools, they were at the top of the pile?
They were the pile.
Okay. And then other offshoots started to
imitate? There are a lot well, Stanley made a lot of tools for large hardware companies. And then the hardware companies would have Stanley stamp their name on the Stanley made tool. Then there were other smaller offshoots that tried to compete with Stanley, and they would make a product that was a little different and perhaps not quite as expensive and maybe not quite as good. The finish was a little different, the wood was a little different, something like that.
Yeah, and then there was a transitional period from the wood planes, and then the metal era came in. And I can see there could be a lot of variation in the quality of the metal products also.
When the metal planes first came in to popularity in the 1860s to 1880s, quality was very important to the buyer. And you didn't see very many shoddy products being sold because these people earned their living using the tool, and they would not use a tool that didn't hold up.
That was inferior.
Yes. Later on, when competitors came in, you got to see some, I guess I use the word inferior products coming on the market.
So I want to start collecting Stanley planes. I should narrow my vision.
Well, you've already narrowed it. You said you want to start collecting Stanley planes.
Right.
Not Stanley rules, not Stanley plumb bobs, not Stanley chisels, Stanley planes.
And be selective.
Buy the best quality that you can. It's going to cost you more money to start with, but it's going to hold its value.
It's going to hold its value, and you're building a nice collection.
You can go to a flea market and you can buy a Stanley No. 5 with a broken handle and an improper blade and a rusty body for $5.
Yeah.
And you'll be lucky to be able to sell it for $5 in the next 20 years. You can spend $75 and get one that's nice and clean, and you'll be able to sell it for that much or perhaps a little bit less, depending on the popularity of tools at the time. But they will come closer to holding their value.
Yeah. So.
Don't buy rust.
I have some of those in the back. You've seen them. Those are good tips in if you're getting started, reach out to the clubs, follow them, and you
get a lot of information from friends, mentors. If you can find a good, reliable dealer, someone who will stand behind his tools, that's a wonderful thing to have.
We share an acquaintance, you more so than myself, with Wayne up there, I-76, and one of the little things that catches my eye and it intrigues me is cast iron cookware.
Yes.
And Wayne is a wizard with cast iron cookware, and you take it from his shop and take it home and put it on the stove and use it.
You can use it, yes.
Right, and so I'm seeing similarities in the woodworking tools also.
You don't want to buy a piece of cast iron that has a crack or has a warp, because it's never going to get any better.
Yeah.
And same thing with that rusty, improper, broken handle No. 5. It's not going to heal itself.
Right. So spend a little extra,
right,
and get what you want to have.
Sure.
I appreciate you stopping in with us again and touching on the restoration and some of the buying tips. Now we're transitioning. We've witnessed it in our lifetimes, going from hand tools to electrified tools. Something can be said for both, but if you want that authentic, handmade piece of furniture or a spoke stave for the back of a chair that's broke, an antique chair, there's only one way to go about it from what I'm learning.
If it was a handmade piece of furniture, you're going to have to restore it using hand tools.
To do it the right way.
Yes.
To do it the right way. Okay, well, hey, we've touched on a little bit more again today. We're gonna get a little more specific on some tools.
Okay.
Maybe down the road here. We'll see where that takes us. We've got there's so much opportunity in the antique woodworking tools.
Yes.
From gauges to planes to saws, scraper tools, So we're going to have a lot to talk about.
We can.
All right, and we will. Folks, stay with us. We're going to have more conversation with Mike Jenkins, and we're going to learn together. We're going to learn about some antique woodworking tools. So until next time, follow us on social and stay tuned. We've got more fun stuff coming up. For all you folks listening, thanks for talking shop with Baird Brothers Fine Hardwoods. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date with the American Hardwood Advisor series, give us a like and subscribe. For more tips, projects, and inspiration, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or at BairdBrothers.com. Until next time,